Okay, so in this video we're going to do the delete function, and I'll double click the delete button. Here I am in the event handler, and so the first thing we'll do is open the connection to the database. Recall that when we first read the records from the database, we closed the connection when we were done, and I mentioned that that is good practice. So now we're ready to interact with the database again to delete a record, and so I'm going to reopen that connection. So then I'm going to create a string variable to have the SQL statement for the delete operation. So we're deleting from book where book ID equals, and then we're putting a question mark as like a placeholder for the book ID. Okay, and so this is kind of similar to our parameter query that we created, that we've been working on the past couple of weeks. And so we'll come back to this question mark later, but for now just think of it as a placeholder for the book ID. And then we're going to package that SQL statement in the command object, as we did in the initial reading of the data. So anyway, that question mark, what we have to do is create a separate parameter object to satisfy that question mark, so to speak. And so we're creating a new OLEDB parameter. This is not super important. I typically will call it the same name as the column name just for consistency, but it doesn't really matter what you put here. And more importantly, the parameter value that we're going to provide is coming from the book ID text box on the design here. So it's whatever, if I'm looking at, say, the first book, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, it has a book ID of 1. If I hit delete current at that moment, then the 1 is plugged into that parameter, and the Sorcerer's Stone will be deleted. So we're grabbing that ID from the text box, and then, so this is basically a two-part process, creating this parameter. You create the parameter object, and then you add the parameter to the command object's parameters collection. So it's always kind of a 1-2 technique here with 2 steps. Okay, so then finally we're ready, we're locked and loaded, we can execute the command, and this is the syntax that we use. And then finally, clean up after yourself, close that connection. As I said before, you're not going to leave the database connections hanging open like that. Okay, so this is just here in case I am deleting, let's see, the last book. If there's a last book, then once the book disappears, you want to maybe decrement current book so it'll land on the second to the last book. It might throw an exception if you don't do that, so we would have to test that and see. But that's just basic, just kind of making sure that the interface behaves properly or nicely. Okay, and then this part is more interesting. Now the book is deleted from the data table, so you want to kind of refresh the data. Like, you have to think of this like you have the database with the book table and the actual data, and then your program is dealing with a not a data set object per se, but we have a list of type book that has the data in it. So we have to refresh that list and repopulate it. So what I can do is, this is the list. It's the list of type book, list as in this guy, okay, that we've known for a while. And so this is the list of type book. I'm wiping it out, and then I'm calling my read data method to repopulate that list. So then it will go up to the read data that we talked about in the first video in this series. So it's just going to reopen that database connection, select everything, use the data reader to read all those books into the list again. So you want to keep your list synchronized with the data in the data table, and so that's why we're doing that. Okay, so in the next video we will talk about the update operation.